Hello, this is Hilary Robertson. Welcome to the latest episode of Harmonious World. The piece you've just been listening to is the opening of the song that I came to sing by Craig Johnson, my guest on today's show. We discussed this piece during our conversation, but I hope you enjoyed that extract from it. We had a fascinating conversation and I hope you enjoy listening to it.
Hi, Hilary.
Hey!
Wonderful to meet you. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing very well.
Thank you for joining me on Harmonious World.
Pleasure to be with you today.
Fantastic. So we're talking about this album, The Singing Guitar. By the way, before we start, I do want to say that your piece, which has got the cello and then the voices and then it finishes with the cello, it's very brief, but it's beautiful, isn't it?
Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
It was a piece that I wrote actually as sort of not an afterthought, but when we were putting the program together, I felt like the program needed something before we entered these works with guitar, and almost a sort of the ears yearning to hear these new textures and timbres. And so I actually used it at the beginning of the concert, even though it's at the end of this CD collection. And but I appreciate that very much. Thank you.
That's all right. I mean, I've always liked the cello anyway, and it's just beautiful. That melody, it's such a simple melody, isn't it? At the beginning and then again at the end. But
it's a repeating, yeah, and the beautiful text from Tagore, which is special. Yeah.
So tell me how this album came about, and you discovered these amazing compositions.
Well, it's extraordinary, the journey it's taken. We started out, probably several years ago now. I was meeting with a presenter, and we were going to call Texas Performing Arts at the University of Texas here, and in collaboration with them and the Austin Classical Guitar Organization, we were going to try and collaborate on a work together. Initially, it just started with the presenter, though, because I had this initial desire to I like playing with textures and with textures, groups of sounds together, and we're always trying to sort of think about sort of the next interesting thing maybe we could do with choir, to play with find new partners and collaborative partners to create new textures, new works, new settings, new presentation styles. So for this, I had talked to this, I shared the idea of kind of thinking about St. Mark's in Venice and all the antiphonal choirs. And I wondered if there could ever be sort of a play around with sort of guitar choirs and choirs of voices. So the initial idea was even to be a little bit larger, is that we might have some groups of guitars and they might play back and forth, kind of only using that sort of choral antiphonal structure as a model, from the Renaissance. And so it was kind of a fun idea to play with. And long story short, the journey went from there to, how about 3 guitar quartets? And so the idea of playing with guitars and voices in this setting. So 3 guitar quartets and choir voices. And then we approached Nico Muhly to see if he would be open to this. It was a big deal kind of for him to consider, because it's something that had never been done before. So he was happy to take it on. We were just delighted. So we commissioned him for this work. It's about a 45-minute work, and that became really the centerpiece of this whole project. We premiered that, I think, 5-6 years or 4 years before the actual recording. So that was with us for a while. And then after that, as we got closer to, I knew I wanted to record it, because I think it's a work that really needs to be experienced as a recording. It's very interesting as a live work, but my idea for this CD is very much, that you find a very comfortable beanbag chair or something that you love to kind of slouch into, get your favorite headphones, or if you're lucky to have wonderful speakers, and just let this sound sort of surround you. It's very atmospheric. It sort of speaks of landscapes, both literal landscapes on the American plains, but also kind of emotional landscapes. And so this was the beginning of this project was that initial idea.
Okay, and you're obviously very fortunate to have all of these talented singers and guitarists in Texas around you, and so I guess it was just connecting with everybody and getting it organized to perform and then to record.
Yeah, well, and they all actually, the musicians weren't so close. The singers were in the habit. Conspirare brings singers from all over the country every time we meet, so it's kind of a national roster of singers. So we're kind of used to that. But also the guitarists, we knew we very much wanted the Los Angeles Guitar Quartet. They're just world class, and they travel all over. People in every major city in the world know about the Los Angeles Guitar Quartet. So we wanted them to be involved. And then we also, for the premiere, brought a group from Dublin, the Dublin Guitar Quartet. And so that was pretty special. And then the Texas Guitar Quartet. So for the recording, we had difficulties getting the Dublin guys back, and for all kinds of financial and logistical reasons. But so then we had a group come in, the Austin Guitar Quartet. So yeah, it's a difficult work in many ways to perform. I mean, the guitarists have to be really good, and they have to be really sensitive to one another. The balance issues are important to be tuning into. But yeah, it was a great company of voices and guitarists that came together for this.
Yeah. Now, I have to confess to not really understanding about guitar quartets. So, because I'm a saxophonist, so if you get a saxophone quartet together, it's either soprano, alto, tenor, baritone, or it's two altos, tenor, baritone. Mm-hmm. Usually, what are these four guitars that are all the same, or how does that work?
Yeah, I mean, the essentially yes. So it's not similar to sort of the sax quartet. Or even a string quartet, where there's sort of treble, middle, low. But these are all basically similar instruments. And so they're playing within this similar register. Sometimes an instrument will have an extension, a lower extension, and things are some peculiar. There might be occasionally someone's playing with more strings than others. But generally speaking, these guitarists have basically similar instruments. So it's a lot of playing in the same region. And so in order to kind of bring out those sounds, one has to be very tuned in. That's why it's lovely for a recording too, because with post-editing, you can highlight things.
Right.
And we try and do that as best we can in a live performance too.
Yeah. And then of course, when the voices come in and there's a change in that, in the sound and the warmth of it, it's glorious, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. I love the combination. I mean, as long as guitars have existed, there's been a sense of connecting the guitar with the voice, or say the lute with the voice. These instruments that there's such a natural connection. And so I love the relationship too here when we begin with the guitars, and then as you say, the voices come and kind of are a container for the larger sound. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So when was this recorded? It was presumably pre-pandemic.
Yes, it was recorded in the fall of 2019.
Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
In Austin?
In Houston, actually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It's tricky to find just the right space, but we had a wonderful large church there, St. Luke's United Methodist in Houston, and they let us kind of take over their space for about 4 days.
Right. And did you record all of the pieces as live? I mean, obviously there was some post-production anyway, but were they generally recorded, start to finish?
No, we went in as if it was a studio recording. We had done 3 live performances of the whole program, kind of top to bottom. And then when we recorded, we had 4 days. And so we would just start with one movement and record it until we got what we thought we needed, and then go on to the next one. So yeah.
Right. And each of the 2 sort of main pieces have 6 movements. Is that right? So yes, that's quite unusual in itself, isn't it?
to have a multi-movement work in
Yeah.
these ways. Yeah. I'm very interested in that. I have been kind of my whole choral life. I feel like, once we got hit up with the iPod Shuffle many years ago, and these short little, we start to get our attention spans thinking that we only have a 3-minute or a 4-minute attention span. I just know that our bodies and our whole spirits, we're wired for more, and so I'm very interested in pieces that have a longer arc. I find it so satisfying, and I hear that from audience members too, who are very grateful to say they love to be able to sort of use that aspect of their perception and sort of receiving sound over a longer arc. So yeah, that we commissioned both of these, and we wanted them both to be extended works.
So obviously this was recorded right, literally just before the pandemic, a few months before the pandemic. Did everything just go on hold then in sort of March last year?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, by that time, I was deep in the post editing with our producer who was in Brooklyn. And so we were back and forth and back and forth. What we would have probably, well, what we certainly would have done, we would have had 3-4 days at least together in person where we're sitting next to each other, at the computer and at the audio workstation. But we couldn't do that at all. And so thankfully, all of this was electronically possible too, to go back and forth. And so it was actually quite a long editing process. We both got very, very, I would say, fussy about it, and we kind of, it was a privilege. We would have, I mean, that was our interest anyway, but there was something about this pandemic time that really allowed us this sort of sense of space, and certain other things, were no longer lacking that urgency because they weren't happening, and so I really appreciated that. And I feel like the CD benefited from it too. Andreas Meyer was the producer, and so grateful to him. He was a beautiful partner in this. We took so much time and care, and he was so responsive. I would send him, lists of single space notes, just, and we would talk on the phone, and, he just responded to absolutely every request about shaping and shading. And so I think we both felt very proud of where it landed, where it evolved. And, and I think it's going to be, I find it to be an interesting project. I'm very devoted to it, and I like sharing about it, but it's not the kind of a piece that you can just kind of have a quick pass by, for say Nico's piece, for example, a quick pass by and kind of get it right immediately. I mean, there's a way in which it takes time to absorb what's there. I will say with repeated listenings, I always encourage people, really, if you have the possibility, to stick with this. And it's a piece that will continue to reveal more and yield more in the listener's experience.
Yes, I think that's true. I listened to it when I first got it, and then I obviously re-listened to it now, prior to this interview. And there are more things that resonate with you. You hear something slightly different in one of the voices or one of the lines, one of the musical lines.
Absolutely. And just it feels like kind of well, our relationships are like this too. Some people just takes more time to get to know them and to kind of see their essence revealed, and sometimes, I mean, each one of us maybe has had someone in life where it's taken a long, long, long time, and yet we find, like, thank God I hung in there, because there's such a gold nugget at the center of this person's soul that I would not have seen had I been looking for kind of strobe lights and an immediate pow. I think in Nico's piece, for example, the big solo movement, the fourth movement, I try and listen to that sometimes objectively, if I hadn't been the conductor and the commissioner and been so close to it, and what it would be like. And I think at a first hearing, I could see how this might be. A listener might think they're not sure where to place their attention, and yet, as I was editing that, I just found it to be like really a spiritual experience. I just would listen again and again, and each time I would drop down a little deeper. He's really created something really special, and of course, it's a very difficult soprano solo. She's walking the tightrope. Any soprano can tell you that it's a really challenging solo. but it was all for musical reasons. I mean, the solo evokes the incredible distances in those prairies, the spaciousness, the loneliness that was felt.
Yeah, definitely. And I don't know if I think you might be too young, but I remember watching Little House on the Prairie.
I'm not too young.
Okay.
I'm going to send you $20 in the mail, though.
And there is something about those vistas, those huge expanses that they covered in. I mean, certainly she covered in the book, but came across in the filming, which I think come across in this, and because that's the sort of subject matter, if you like, behind both of these pieces, is about that. Is the women who came to America often because their husbands decided that was what they were going to do, but these women kind of helped really create the America that we've got, and they don't get remembered in the right way. We remember the men, and
You're exactly right. Yeah, that feels core to this whole project. Yeah, I mean, came to America, and then just these men who kind of needed to be conquering things.
Yeah.
Conquer this, conquer that, over and over again. And here, I think there's something extraordinary about these stories that at face value can seem so plain and ordinary, a woman who, but I mean, it's just the opposite. I mean, a woman who alone is handling everything about the household. I mean, with such incredible vulnerability to the natural elements,
Yeah.
just out there with children to raise, but no real way to kind of find means to, I mean, how do you feed your children? How do you withstand against these elements? How do you deal with that personal loneliness? How do you, I mean, it took intelligence, it took strength, but yeah, they're not the ones that get heard. And then, by one of the things that felt important to me with this project, and I don't get to talk about it often, so I'm happy to get to with you because of your lead in, but when we knew I wanted to record this, but I also knew we wanted to balance it with something that addressed Native Americans and hopefully women from Native American tribes, because one of the things, I mean, I don't want to overgeneralize, but it's pretty easy just to state that one of the things these men were doing in the prairie, women who were conquering lands that didn't belong to them,
Right.
and taking over these native lands. And so I really wanted to have some restorative aspect balancing with this project. So it's women's stories, but it's women across a spectrum. Who were the counterparts? So when I went to Kyle Smith and I said, I really would love to find some way to express Indigenous Native American, story or stories here from a woman's perspective. And he, after much research and going back and forth, attached to this wonderful story of Sarah Winnemucca, who we now know is the first Native American woman to be published in English. And it's a powerful story that she tells. And I'm really, really delighted that he brought her forward and her words and this story. And as you know, he does this sort of recomposition, brand new music to the text of our national anthem, the Star Spangled Banner. And it was a very meaningful thing for us to sing, to kind of sing it with new melodies, new everything, a new perspective, new eyes. This was very important to us. And then I think my piece that you had mentioned earlier, the song that I came to sing based on Tagore, was very much a lead-in to this. The song that I came to sing remains unsung, which I feel is, could be true for just about every human being, but particularly so those voices who had been silenced or underrepresented in our worlds, whose voices have not been fully heard and their yearnings have not been fully met, their ambitions, their dreams, their visions. So that was kind of the lead into this whole program. and then Rena's piece, which is so much about forgiveness. I mean, it's just, there's a lot. So, I mean, we were kind of weaving these themes a lot, but I'm grateful for your reference of that.
Yeah, it's an album that sits together, isn't it? It's an album that really you could almost listen back to front. I mean, I genuinely, I mean, I loved the song that I came to sing, and it's such a simple, beautiful piece, and yet at its heart is something that is, it's so important, isn't it? The number of people. I mean, I'm a woman, and sometimes our voices don't get heard. We're not encouraged to speak out or sing out, except under the gaze of a man,
Yes.
and it's fascinating that this album delves really deep into that.
Well, thank you for knowing that and for acknowledging it. It is very important to my heart that this was at the core of this project, and to all of us. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And more than just sometimes. I mean, it's unfortunately been the case of such extraordinary imbalance and injustice. I mean, may we see it change, dramatically in our lifetimes, please. May it be so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's hope
it
so.
felt really important in that way too. As we were getting closer, I thought, the one thing that does not feel right to me yet is that we don't have the voice of a female composer. And so that's when I went to Rena, and I thought, is there something she really, I wanted to see if time was getting short, but I wanted to see if she could possibly write something new, and her schedule was very, very full. But she said, you know what, I wonder if I could do a rewrite. She had a piece called When the Violin, which was based on a poem of Hafiz, the 13th century mystic. And she said, that might be something I could do a rewrite for. She said, and then the more she thought about it, she got so excited. She said, I think it could be an amazing work for guitars. And then thankfully she was out in Los Angeles, and I mean, she was, I think, something like 2 miles. That's just unheard of in LA, 2 miles away from Bill, who is sort of the spokesperson for the guitar quartet, and he kind of the sort of concert master, if you will. And so they met a handful of times, and they were both so excited. And it's such a gorgeous piece. And so I'm so grateful that all came about too.
Yeah, it is important that we think about women's voices, women's compositions, women's words, and everything. So this is a great album for that. Can you talk to me a little bit about Conspirare and where that's come from? Because it sounds like it's more than just a local choir of people who happen to live near each other.
Yeah. I so wish we could be local, because I'd love to have them closer by. So the organization's about 27 years old now. So but we have been singing for a long time, and the we is a roster of singers that evolves over time, of course, but it's a roster of extraordinary singers, soloists, each in their own right, who come together and are dedicated to the music making within Conspirare, this professional choir. And we have singers coming from all over the States, and one of our singers has even moved to France, and so we still get her to come back whenever we can. But I'm so inspired by them. They're talented musicians. They read extraordinarily fast, and just can come together quickly. And there's a kind of a shorthand now after many years of making music. And even though the personnel isn't exactly the same each rep, there's a core that's consistent and has been for many years now, with always a delight to welcome new members too. But there's a dedication there to their artistry, always, first and foremost. And then there's also a real dedication to know, how can we serve the world with our music? That is to say, kind of serve the world's awakening by, just being as present to our art making as possible, to do what we do with also a spirit of generosity and love. And I think, and at this point, as the world has been through so much, we all feel that we just can't make music separate from sort of the volatility and the intensity of our time, so we always somehow want to find ways to connect and sing into that with love and support and compassion for each other.
Great. Brilliant. So and what about the future? Have you got gigs lined up? Have you got recitals planned in?
Yeah, I mean, we're planning a lot. I mean, it's hard to know exactly when that first date will be, as for all of us, because of COVID. And I think everybody's getting vaccinated, so that's great. And so, I think that will probably end up being a requirement for people to sing, and even audiences. And yet I think there's sort of a psychological piece too, when our audience is really ready to come and sit. I mean, many people are absolutely, let it happen today, I'm ready. And there are other people on the other end of the spectrum who are like, I'm still kind of cautious. So I think we want to feel into that. But yeah, we have some fun plans. We're hoping to possibly be singing in October live again for the first time. Cross our fingers and pray that the world continues to heal.
Yeah. Well, fantastic. That's brilliant. Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciated talking to you.
Oh, it's really a joy to talk to you, Hilary. So good to meet you, and all best with all that you're doing.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you for joining me once more on Harmonious World. That was a lovely conversation with Craig Johnson, and I hope you enjoyed it. I'm going to finish with the ending of When the Guitar by Rina Ismail. Thank you for joining me once more on Harmonious World. Please do subscribe, leave me a review, let me know what you think. My social media accounts are in the show notes. Thank you for joining me once more, and I look forward to speaking to you soon. Thank you for listening to the latest episode of Harmonious World. My name is Hilary Seabrook, and it's a great delight to bring this series of discussions with musicians and composers and writers and all sorts of people to you. Obviously, there's no point in having a podcast if people aren't listening, and I'm very grateful to my listeners for doing so. Thanks also to Joe English for composing and performing this new theme tune. So wherever you get your podcast, you can leave a review. You can share this with your friends and family, either as a link or on social media and that sort of thing. I'd be really grateful for that. Don't forget that you can subscribe now. There's a link wherever you get your podcasts. So have a great week, and please remember why I started this, which is just to try and make the world a little more harmonious. Thanks for listening to Harmonious World.